Good morning for me. It's good afternoon for you. Hopefully, it's been a long day. I'm sure you've heard a lot of great stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to launch my presentation here. Share screen. And hopefully this is going to work. So I think you should be seeing something now.
Yeah, we're
all good.
Yeah.
So Studio Farrell. My name is Tom Farrell. I'm the founder of Studio Farrell, and unfortunately, this is now playing. There we go. So yeah, I was thrilled when Andy asked me to come along and say a few words, present some ideas. I love the subject line: communication, not decoration. It's an important topic, I think, certainly for graphic designers as we enter a new age with technology hitting us from every corner. This is kind of a table of contents. I'm going to somehow, well, hopefully stitch all these together and make some sense of it all. I'm going to go from noise to Alan Fletcher right down to thieves and Martin Lambinaire and Coca-Cola, FedEx, and magicians. So hopefully it's going to make sense. I hear from Andy that you had a lot of fun with Greg and Nick this morning. So we'll go straight into the data slides. I know designers love data. We're in a data-driven economy now. Clients want to hear how the creative is connected to the numbers. But this is a chart from like 6 years ago, 2017, and talked about the amount of content that's being generated every day. And by 2025, it'll be 500 billion gigabytes per day. And I think we've already surpassed that. I mean, with TikTok, AI, chatbot, all this stuff, all this new technology is coming on board. The amount of content that's being generated is enormous. And as designers, as communicators, we're going to have to operate in that context. So forget the numbers, but that provides some, I think, overall context for my presentation. And this is from the same report. It was an IBM report. People, businesses, and devices have all become data factories that are pumping out incredible amounts of information to the web every day. So that statement still holds true, regardless of the number of gigabytes and trillions of data that's been created. So I tweaked Andy's presentation. I thought communication, not decoration, absolutely, but I've just tweaked it to say communication, not noise. I think noise is the greatest enemy of communication. I think with that background of the content's being generated, we're really in a noise culture. Content is everywhere. It takes me back to my art school days. When I was in, like you guys, we'd have a party on a Thursday night, right? The place would be banging, there'd be music, debauchery, drunkenness, and it was just mayhem at our flat party or house party. But invariably, in the middle of it, somebody would say, hang on a second, is that the phone ringing? And we'd all stop and we'd listen and say, yeah, you're right. And you'd hear the burr, 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 and forgive the boomer energy, but we had landlines back then. We didn't have mobile phones. But the phone was ringing. It's probably somebody complaining about the noise level. But essentially what was happening there was this notion, these principles, which I think apply to branding, especially in a highly content-driven world. Familiarity, the rings were very familiar. Simplicity of the tone, the repetition, the consistency and predictability. All these principles apply. When you're in a busy marketplace, branding a product or a service, you need to sort of build on these principles. And by the way, I hate using the word simplicity with clients. I think they misinterpret that as simplistic. In other words, it's basic. It's my son who's gone to art school and high school, whatever, can do that. Why are you charging so much money? So for the purposes of this audience, I know you get it. So simplicity is the correct word, but clarity is a great word. It's a word I use all the time with clients. And just keeping an eye on my timing here. You all know this guy, hopefully. To me, he's the father of British graphic design. I'm sure you've seen this quote. I've nothing against Preston, but shouldn't the best course in the country be in its capital? The great Alan Fletcher. But even before I met Andy, I was aware of this quote. I was aware of what he'd said. And I was aware of Preston. I was aware of the work that was being produced at Preston. And certainly from a lot of the graduates that came out of Preston School of Design are superb. They really are great designers, communicators. you know, when you look at Fletcher's book, Art of Looking Sideways, it's such a collection of human stories and human connections. You know, the idea of found objects. You know, he finds joy in the most banal, everyday item, and brings it to this very high level. And he's almost agnostic about anything. He doesn't care. He'll find something. He'll turn it into something magical. So Alan Fletcher was a magician. He was just a conjurer. And if you look at the clarity of his work, you know, just by adding the simple stripe at the bottom, you know exactly what he's talking about here, which tower he's talking about. And again, I love the reductive, you know, it's not over embellished, he's not over communicating, he just does the right amount of visual cues. He was also, you know, very subversive, you know, in his found objects. He would turn them around, he would turn it upside down, turn it inside out, whatever, to achieve that sort of jolt. It forces you to reconsider these very ordinary everyday items and see the magic or see the potential in them to create great communication. So this is this Down with Dogma piece. So in the world of graphic design, you know, I see this as two worlds here, you know, communication versus decoration. I'm nothing against David Carson, he's a lovely man. But I remember when David was really big, he was the biggest thing in graphic design, you know, and it sort of, he had exhibitions everywhere. You know, you couldn't walk down the street without hearing or talking about David Carson. The work he did on oh God, I'm slipping his magazine, was revolutionary. But it was the complete opposite to Alan Fletcher and his sort of DNA. That's the way I saw it. I was a follower of Alan Fletcher and his sort of modernist thinking. And it was almost like, you know, David, and he has a lot of followers. I met a lot of people who grew up with David Carson and believe in that whole, you know, technology-driven process to get to creative ideas, to get to great work. Whereas Alan and his successors, as I see them, were very much ideas-based. They were not driven by technology. To them, was the central idea was the way you connect to audiences. And I see that DNA coming through in Pentagram, in Eddie Tattersfield, you know, the partners. These have all sort of disappeared, and Pentagram's still around. Turner Duckworth, you know, to me was one of the biggest influences in my career was David Turner. You know, Hattrick, Sutherland, Belford, Paul Belford, and Mucho. I think Mucho are doing some great work today, but you can see in their work, these, you know, they're new kids on the block, but the DNA is there, the crafting, the idea. Whereas, you know, on the other side, this technology-driven approach, you know, for a decade, people were terrified of desktop publishing. You know, it's going to replace us all. Design was dead. But really, you know, it's so similar to what's happening today with AI. People are running around freaking out about AI, a new technology replacing. And I think AI, all that new stuff will play its way out. The way desktop publishing played its way out. Essentially, the folks on the left burned out. You know, once the great designers got hold of the technology, it was a different story, and great work was being produced using these tools, not driven by the tools. And I worked at Pentagram after college, and I could see that sort of dilemma, the schism between these two worlds, where they were not, Pentagram was not at the time engaging with technology at all. They didn't have Macintoshes. One partner had Macintoshes, but there were a couple in the corner that I was sort of fiddling around with. I worked for this man, the great McConnell, John McConnell, who was so well known for one of his projects. He came to college to talk to us about it, the Faber and Faber redesign, where, you know, he famously, as a project, he instead of joining in with all the decoration, he could have gone with more die cutting, more gold stamping, more, you know, embossing to create an identity for Faber and Faber. He went the opposite. He started to reduce and declutter everything, and he came up with this incredibly iconic system that was replicated and copied by many others. But this notion of creating space, I think, is a great way of thinking about communication. You got to push all the crap back. You got to push the noise back, create a blank space, and then within that blank space, present a great idea that connects to consumers or to an audience. This is a great quote from the guy's book, which to me is a fantastic book. But John said, "I've always liked cliches. At art school, I was accused of being too interested in them. Lecturers would say that's a terrible cliche, as though it was a disgusting habit. I now regret that I allowed that criticism to be painful." So it brought me back when I read that quote. I did a graduate school at Central School, just before it became Central St. Martin's. So it was just happening around the time. And, you know, essentially I was looking for a portfolio school. They're very popular here in the States where, you know, you can change careers and just go do a 2-year course, create a portfolio and, you know, polish up your work. So I went there, you know, I guess secretly to just build a new portfolio, gussy it up, get out on the street and do the agency interviews and get a swanky new job. But instead I ended up in a master's that was focused on theory mostly. And within the first week or two, we were presented with this task. We said, okay, present a 45-minute presentation on the following subject. My subject was cliches of the language through which design communicates. I was freaked out. I was like, no, I'm a studio designer. You hand me the brief, I'll design the logo, I'll do the mug, I'll stick it on a t-shirt and I'll throw a van in, you know, that's the way, you know, a next job, please. But this notion of, okay, you have to go and develop a presentation around this, to me, was like blowing my mind. Like I just couldn't fathom it. I thought this has been a terrible mistake. Why did I go back to college? But it's like anything in life. If you're out of your comfort zone and you tackle it, I started to get really interested in the subject. And this notion of redundancy and entropy came into the presentation, which I stumbled through and people were mystified by what the hell I was talking about. But this idea of something is very common, it's understood, it's familiar, or it's chaotic, or it's complex. So this notion of the familiar and the complex, this sort of dichotomy of the two, there's two worlds. So you have the expected and the unexpected. And to illustrate in my talk, I put this poster together, and this is a reconstruction of the poster, but it says, Mary had a little gram. Talk to your child early about drugs. And that was the example I was using. And essentially, 50% of that work is a cliche. It's familiar, it's banal, it's throwaway. It's like, yeah, Mary had a little lamb. Like, I don't need to think about it. But by adding the complexity on the end of it, you're forcing the person to reconsider that cliche, that what they accepted as the norm. And I love this quote from David Ogilvy, you know, the great David Ogilvy. It takes a big idea to jolt the consumer out of his indifference. You all know this lady, Britain has talent, I think, back in the day, Susan Boyle. And I always use this as a metaphor for potential work or projects, whatever. But this lady, this sort of middle-aged lunch lady arrives on the stage and everyone, you know, the eye rolling begins in the audience. Like, there's nothing to see here. I know this stereotype. There's nothing unexpected, surprising. I've pigeonholed this person and the look, nothing's new. And then she opens her mouth and this aria comes out and people are blown away. They're suddenly disrupted by thinking, hang on a second, this plain lady like that I'm taking for granted and is invisible, I ignore, is now producing this amazing art. What else is there? What else can be turned into magic, the way Alan Fletcher would do it? So this notion of making the ordinary extraordinary is kind of a core principle of mine as I tackle work. Two of my creative heroes, on the left is Hitchcock. He always wallowed in this, turning the expected into the unexpected. Like he would present two pictures, one of this sort of knuckle dragging, crazy looking guy, with, drool running down his out of his mouth. And then he presents a picture of a cozy little granny next to him and say, one of these is an axe murderer who's murdered an entire family. And you go, well, obviously it's the stereotypical guy on the left. No, it's actually the granny. And it's shocking. You're totally disrupting my preconceived notion of what is normal and what is not normal. The one on the right is Jerry Seinfeld, another creative hero of mine, where Jerry wallows in the banal, the everyday, noticing things. It's observational comedy. And he said he spent years trying to figure out a joke about Pop-Tarts. He said, I know there's something in there. And he kept working and working until he figured out and he developed a joke. But that notion of something's everyday, it can be special. Susan Boyle is a great example. Here's another example from Alan Fletcher, the found object, Evian. It's turned into naive, and you go, wow, who knew that something so powerful could live within just something that's very ordinary and everyday? So this idea of ordinary and everyday, here's an example of a project, an identity project we did for a carpenter. Local carpenter, called Clean Cut Carpentry. He was waiting for that name forever. You know, he's a one-man band. He's bespoke. He does very high quality bespoke furniture, one-offs. And it also reminded me of, and here you see the concept, you know, the clean cut through the sea is, you know, a literal interpretation of clean cut. This could be your first year word is image project that Andy or Ted might pose for you. But I was always struck by a quote from Stefan Sagmeister in New York. He said when he went to college in Switzerland, design school, he noticed, you know, everywhere in the town, people would have these great identities, you know, the butcher, the baker, the dressmaker. And he realized that the local people were benefiting from the designers that were in the college. And there were this notion of making great identities or interesting, compelling identities for small local businesses, I think is fundamental. You know, you can elevate something like a carpenter or a dressmaker or a florist. So here we use that notion of the split C. Instead of, you know, avoiding the split in the hat, we actually lay the symbol over the split. So we're actually using that insight or that little feature of the garment, whereas the zipper on the hoodie, to emphasize the man's brand logo. Even got to do a van. You know, here's the split on the. If you've ever done any van signage, you're always trying to avoid the split. So, oh God, how are we going to work everything around that nasty split? Here we say no, we embrace it. We actually integrate it with because the identity is focused on that. Coffee house is another example of a small business where, you know, small coffee shop. Coffee house is a play on Maxwell House, was where they were going. But it always bugged me that the symmetry wasn't there between the letters in coffee and house. So I thought we'll just add another S. I've done that sometimes with clients. Say, well, you know, let's put another letter in there and make it unique. You can trademark it a lot easier, actually. So we thought, hang on a second, we can see something in there. We flip the S around and added two little handles. And now we have this idea of two coffee cups saying cheers, you know, for coffee lovers everywhere. And that became their kind of their tagline for coffee lovers. The icon then becomes a little beacon for their signage or their swag, their totes, business cards, and so on. But again, it's an example of where, you know, no project cannot be special, if that makes sense. You know, everything has the potential to be wonderful and great, and, you know, D&AD quality. Not that we entered as D&AD, but it should be able to exist at that level. So searching for the FedEx arrow, another favorite piece I love. You know, it's surprising, and I've dealt with marketers when I worked at Coca-Cola. You know, I was dealing with a lot of people who were working with creative agencies. And one day I said, yeah, I was using the example of the FedEx arrow, this idea of something's embedded, it's hidden, that you discover it over time. And it becomes this way of, once you discover it, you participate in it. You know, you become an active participant in the design. And once you see it, you can never unsee it, right? The arrow is there. And it was stunned by the number of people who didn't see it. Like, these are experienced marketers that go, wow, I've never seen the arrow before. And yet this van, I assume you have it in the UK, FedEx, everywhere. You can't walk down the street in America without seeing the FedEx logo. And yet an awful lot of people don't see it. You realize that, you know, as designers, sometimes we're overshooting, where we go beyond simple communication. This is very simple communication to me. I think it's great design. It's fantastic identity. But sometimes we get caught up in ourselves. We're talking to ourselves with design and the future of design, et cetera. Really, we should be designing for real people. You know, I love mass audiences. At Coca-Cola, we dealt with mass products. You're in people's houses. I still live by this motto of, you know, the 10-year-old, the little kid sitting at breakfast, staring at the cornflakes box and finding these nuggets, finding, you know, the mind of a child will discover things. And once those ideas are embedded, they never unsee them. Here's an example of, you know, a pitch we did for a company, shaving company. We thought their identity was missing the opportunity. It looked very technical, looked very sterile. And we thought, so, you know, our proposal was that, you know, humans, you're shaving humans, and humans are curvy and they're not straight lines. They're not technical. They're not robots. So it's, again, following the principle of the FedEx arrows. How do we embed something, a little Easter egg in there that can be discovered? So the the L in logic is hidden within there, and the razor is just pulling down the negative space of the S. And you'll notice there in the leg, I'm not sure if you're seeing my cursor. You don't see? Oh yeah, you see. We'll just add a little extension to the baseline of the H, which we then exploit with as a mnemonic for packaging. You know, it creates this, rather than just logo slapping, you can use a secondary element to apply to various different products. It could be in store, it could be out of home, whatever. But it expands the identity system to give you that extra visual element. And of course, you got to have a tote bag. If you don't have a tote bag, you're not really a brand. They turned this down. Our pitch was not successful because it turned out they just redesigned their identity. The identity wasn't, their brand new spanking new identity wasn't 3 months old when we got hold of it. And it's like, no way, we're not going to throw away all that money and all that work. So it never saw the light of day. But again, it's our approach. We say there's always a delightful something in there that we can exploit. Here's an example of a real project. It was a racing stable called Airfield. I think it was my brother's company back in the day, but they train racehorses, and racehorses, the saddles in racehorses are notoriously high. So the stirrup is extremely high. That's the way they ride them because they're super light jockeys. But again, you know, we use the capital E to create the little saddle, the negative space within the E itself. And it can be very iconic. It's undecorated, and it emphasizes that it's a racing stable. Love this quote. I'm not sure who came up with it, but it's this notion of this. It's the simplicity of sushi that makes it so difficult to master. And I think it's a great principle for modernist design, for ideas-driven design, where, you know, sushi is so understated, it's so disciplined and so reductive, but it takes a guy 10 years, a master, to master the art of sushi. So I love that applied to the notion of design. Graphic design. Here in the States, you might have heard of this guy, a guy called David Copperfield. He's a sort of Las Vegas magician. And David will do this audacious, you know, so I will now make the Statue of Liberty disappear right before your eyes. Or the pyramids will now be no longer, I'll make them disappear. And you think, you know, how disconnected can be that? It's BS. You say, that's not going to happen. I don't believe you. It's just total nonsense. Because it's so big and audacious, you think, yeah, right. David Blaine is a street, you know David Blaine, but he will walk down the street in Harlem, Spanish Harlem, and freak people out. He'll take something that belongs to them. He said, pull that out of your pocket, your car keys, $1, your wallet, and he'll do something to it within their personal space. He'll create this alchemy, this magic. And it freaks people out. They go running down the street. They think that, you know, some sort of witchcraft. But because it's so close in, because it's so familiar and everyday to them, when you do something magical to it, they lose their minds. You go, hang on a second. So that dollar bill is now suddenly doing something that I never thought it could do. Whereas, you know, David on the other side is trying to make the pyramids disappear. And you go, well, that's whatever. Yeah. So the notion of doing something that's close in to people's lives that's everyday, that's common, that's familiar, I think is how you can make connections with real people, with ordinary people. I love this from Jamie Supple design. This, you know, the squirrels, where just that little element on the capital S, you know, even the leg of on the little leg on the left hand side, it's delightful, it's fantastic, it's effortless, it's timeless, you know, it's got all the qualities of a masterful piece of design work. And what I love the fact is that kids will see that, they'll discover it, they'll be looking at their backpack, whatever, and say, oh look, it's a squirrel, the S makes a squirrel. I can see graphic designers, a generation coming out of this, being influenced by this type of work, because it's within their realm, right? It's within their world, and it becomes very meaningful. And very powerful. There's a very powerful emotional connection being created here, I think. The same this example from Mucho in Rob Duncan's work. To me, it's delightful. It's so reductive but charming. I mean, the boots are they're sexy boots. You know, it's just everything about this works to a point where it's so understated, but yet it creates that space. It allows you in a world of, constant TikTok nonsense and bullshit that's happening on in social media. This creates just a little pocket of space where he plants an idea in it, and it's delightful. I think that notion of push everything back, create the moment of calm, and then deliver a really powerful, emotionally connected idea within that. Again, both these examples are ideas driven. There's no technology. Who cares about what technology has been used here? It's irrelevant how they got there. It's what's really relevant or important is the idea behind the work. So here's a project we did for a CBD-induced beverage coffee company. This is a victim of COVID. We started out, it was a Wall Street investor was trying to develop this line, and it crashed because suddenly COVID came and killed everything. But, again, we're looking for that little subtle element within the name itself. And, we're trying to, without touching it too much, we kept the characters all the same. It's still, it's avant-garde, but we just added the little smile, the smirk at the bottom. In other words, you get baked, you get truly baked by this product. It makes you mellow, it makes you happy, it makes you feel great. So we try to inject that right into the heart of the brand mark itself. And then that becomes the main mnemonic. That becomes the way you advertise, the way you communicate around it, that notion of the smile. And it's not a big grin, it's just a little mellow smile that this product gives you a buzz, but you're not stoned, you're not high afterwards. But again, looking for the little opportunity, the moment, and we do that a lot with typography. We love playing with typography and finding that little unexpected element, twist. Here's a company we created the identity for. It's called Robin Duda Creative, and she specializes in putting together conferences for corporations, which is a huge business here. And certainly here in the States and Europe as well. But most conferences are very expected. It's like, you turn up for 3 days, you have a party, you meet all your friends from the global system, and you go back to your desk Monday morning, and that was great. Done for another year. Her whole approach is to create or to develop programs that are unexpected. That in the lineup of speakers, they'll introduce somebody who's maybe an ex-drug addict, somebody who's been, in a wheelchair, handicapped, or somebody who's LGBT. These unexpected stories to disrupt the audience, to say, okay, before you go back to your comfortable 9-to-5 job, consider these other perspectives, consider these other points of view, and take this away from this conference and weave that back into your work and the way you work. And it's a very popular business she's got as far as, companies are looking for new ideas. How do I invigorate or energize my workers, my teams? And so we just use that notion of, very traditionally set piece of type, change the stage, but flipping the lowercase h. I find this incredibly uncomfortable personally. I look at it and go, yeah, I get it, but that H is just screaming at me as far as how uncomfortable it is. And that's the whole point of the business. We want you to feel uncomfortable. We don't want you sitting and lying back. We want you sitting up and paying attention. So always be sketching is a principle I absolutely believe in. And this is a quote from Neville Brody, actually. He was giving a talk, and he made a great point. He said, never stop creating, never stop sketching, never stop ideating, whether it's a sketchbook back of a napkin or on your computer. Use your computer as a sketchbook, but never stop creating, because you don't know where those ideas lead to. It's also a muscle. Designing or being a graphic designer is a muscle. If you're not practicing it, you get stale, you get atrophied. So here's an example. As we were starting up Studio Farrell, we were looking for clients. The clients weren't exactly beating down the door, but I developed this quick poster for a competition. It was actually in the UK. John Hagerty was running it. Entered, kids eat your toes or eat your potatoes. But the notion of playing with the idea of toes and the potatoes and making it kid-centric. We entered this, it didn't really go anywhere, but again, it just gave us an opportunity to build an idea, to build a poster, to build a piece of communication, and see how we could make it engaging. The piece on the right was, I finished breakfast one morning, I was at a meeting, and the banana skin was just lying there. it was just perfectly positioned where it was just covering itself. There was nothing, it was so uncontrolled. So I took a shot of it and added the word modesty. And we had a client, a potential client, who looked at our work, and that was the one takeaway. They said, you know, I love that banana peel graphic. So just in terms of, you know, new business or attracting clients, that was the one thing he took away. He didn't really comment on any of the other work. So even though it's sketching, it's not going anywhere, it still has a function. Here's another example again of just throwing ideas out there, constantly using your muscle. The one on the right is for Disney. We entered this as a submission for 90 years of Mickey Mouse. It's happening a couple of years ago. And, you know, there's 90 years there, if you count them. And then we just dropped used an apostrophe on the years, 90 years of Mickey. You know, we're amateur copywriters. The one on the left is a celebration of Father's Day. Love the symmetry of the reuse of the D. I thought, you know, let's avoid the horrible negative spaces of when you put a capital A between D and D. And we just flip the D around to give us, you know, this sort of interesting graphic treatment. And that actually turned into a project. You know, when we were working for Duda, Robin Duda changed the stage. Her name is Duda, D-U-D-A. So we use that similar sort of device to flip the characters to give her that graphic, but we're reusing that same element. And she was a big sustainability brand, messaging, positioning. So this idea of reuse is, you know, we felt could tie into her overall business strategy. So designing real-time content or designing content in real time is something we used to do at Coca-Cola a lot. And I think it's a result of social media. You know, you can create content immediately, you can react to a situation very quickly and develop some interesting ideas. And here's an example of, you know, when Prince died, you know, it was, to me, personally, it was such an epic event when he passed away. So here's again, you know, the idea of the cliche with the found object, the familiar item. That's the Coca-Cola script, world famous, the purple of Prince, and you bring them together and you just have the broken G string. You know, a lot of people react to this as a sort of, they like this idea of the subtlety of it. The one on the right is, you know, I have a slight obsession with bottle caps, but the idea of Veterans Day or reusing the caps to look at the poppy to commemorate. And again, you know, some people say, hey, this is irreverent, but Coca-Cola is a human brand. It lives in people's hands. You know, soldiers in the trenches in the Second World War drank Coca-Cola. It's a very much a democratic brand, I think. Here's an example, you know, quick turnaround content concepts. Olympics, Coca-Cola at the Olympics. On the right-hand side, it's Halloween. You know, we all celebrate Halloween. And just the notion of, you know, the bite on the neck of the bottle. The campaign at the time was doing bite, what was it? Bite the feeling. No, it was something about the feeling. So we turned it to bite the feeling. Here's an example of, you know, Coca-Cola, the Oscars. We celebrated that with the statue. And again, you know, the cliches there, the recognizable familiar item, but just popping the cork, changing Oscar's head to the opening of the Contro bottle, gave us that sort of interesting graphic mnemonic. Here's one I developed quickly for Gay Pride Week here in the States. And again, it's this notion of, you know, the equal, love is equal. People drinking with a regular straw, people drinking with the colorful straw. And it was almost a play on the civil rights movement where people of color were told to drink from separate fountains. Now, you know, similar rights, civil rights issues are coming up with LGBTQ communities. And this was meant to say, you know, we're all drinking from the same fountain. We're all equal. Love is love. So designing content in real time, this is my Studio Farrell work. The other work was work I did at Coca-Cola, where I was there for quite a while. And again, we're constantly looking at culture, you know, ideas, you know, you're constantly sketching. You're just looking for ways of expressing ideas. So, you know, as you probably know, in this country, we're plagued with gun violence. It was the morning of, there was a Las Vegas, you know, you lose track, Las Vegas massacre about 3-4 years ago, 60 people slaughtered, you know, just unbelievable. I was passing that morning, I was passing this temple. I saw that the flags coming down at half-mast, and I saw this idea of, and again, sketching. Your sketchbook is your greatest tool, by the way, guys. Forget about the Mac. You got to get. I sound like an old curmudgeon, but Sketchbook really allows you to. A bad idea can't live in a sketchbook, but a really bad idea can live in Illustrator for weeks. You can add a drop shadow, or you can add a different filter, and suddenly it looks interesting, and it's not. It's just a bad idea hiding behind technology or behind visual effects. So here's the idea, just in this quick sketch pad, of the bullet coming out of the AR-15, which is the gun that everyone uses to slaughter people over here. As a comment on, the flags are constantly at half-mast. Thoughts and prayers, nothing happens, no legislation, another massacre will happen again next week. And just, as designers, we feel powerless, or as people, we feel powerless. So we react to the way we can, which is through visual, communication, developing content to see if it can resonate or maybe change something, who knows. During that same time, it was one of the hills, Stony Brook, I think, high school massacre. The kids launched a campaign called Enough. It was, orange and black. You could wear an orange T-shirt to empathize with the movement. So, just developed a clip. Enough is six bullets, 6 letters in enough, to try and emphasize or try and do something. Like, we're trying to join in, see if we can make a difference. So in terms of real-time content, the guy on the left, he's essentially, Trump is made up of blue, red, white, and yellow. If you see those combinations anywhere, you know who you're talking about. And it was during the time of the Russia controversy, and he's been accused of being a Russian agent, and it was in the news and so on. So I put together this notion of, the map of Russia, duplicates as his hair, eyebrows. One of the writers, Hillary Clinton, was rumored to be running for mayor of New York. It was in the New York Times. And I quickly developed this. Again, familiar, Hillary Clinton's name is very familiar, but if you flip the 2 letters on the end, you get NY. So this actually went up to their team. A good friend of mine, she was leading the identity for Hillary Clinton's re-election or presidential election. This went up to the team, went to Michael Beirut, who designed the original identity. He was very complimentary. But again, there's a nugget in there that can be leveraged, can be exploited. Spain, example of a massacre, a terrorist attack, the word pain. Vote love was something we developed, myself and my partner, Dikla. Here she is, my creative partner. Hidden within the word vote is you can spell the word love just by flipping a letter, just playing subtly with some of the elements. You can develop this different messaging. Really, it's a response. We raised about $2,000 for the Biden campaign. It's a response to a lot of the stuff that's going on right now. In the United States, the First Amendment allows you freedom of speech, so you can walk around with this flag with no consequences. So we wanted to do something. Was Graphis had a protest magazine or a protest poster competition. So we took the cliche, we took the common, the recognizable, and we added these elements to say, it's essentially a spotlight. It's if you shine a light, you'll drive out fascism. We have to raise this as an issue. We have to be all of us. So here we're just using the notion of the searchlights have caught this asshole in action, and they'll run. They're cowards at the end of the day. We got some nice shout out from Graphis for that, to give some creds and some awards, I think. Here's one for early in the day we entered a Design to Unite in Australia. It was a campaign for Aboriginal people to bring them together. So we submitted as a poster, and again, you find the cliche within the word, that we turned the first letter into a magnet and developed a poster, which we actually had printed. We sold some to raise funds. But I love the fact that Unite at the end becomes unrecognizable. It doesn't read as Unite anymore, because so you don't see separate people, you don't see separate individuals, you just see one united form. So it's just, again, the cliche, the familiar, turning that to your advantage. Here's an example of going back in the archives for Greenpeace, an identity did for a conference called Save the North Sea. And again, the familiar, the fish, but then you notice in the ripples of the fish, you can see the skeleton emerging. And again, that's the same principle as Mary had a little gram, right? You say it's a fish, then you discover the FedEx arrow. You try and find that extra element that jolts you into thinking, no, it's a dying fish. The seas are dying from the toxins that are being dumped in there. Here's the development of that. This is a few years old. But the importance of drawing, sketching, bad ideas will not survive in a sketch pad. So here is just in this development. We started out as a 1, ended up as a fish. We also respond to Earth Day here whenever possible. Here's an example of me trying to do my best Noma Bar impersonation, but just taking the ripples of the plastic bottle. The fish is eating the bottle, is eaten by a bigger fish, the food chain, and it actually comes back and bites us in the backside if we don't do something about plastic pollution. The one on the right is No Idle Threats, pet peeve of mine, people who sit idling in the cars. This was done for our school, our children's school. But the notion that, the fumes are affecting the lungs and the brain was using the same element. And again, it's done in sort of a childlike fashion, perhaps. But the idea of using that the cloud mnemonic to also focus on the damage it's causing to children. So I'm just looking at the time, it's about 10 minutes. Okay, creating space to communicate. I'm going to zip through these pretty fast, guys. So here's a classic example of creating space, this brilliant redesign by Turner Duckworth, Coca-Cola. When I worked there, I just joined just as this was launching. But essentially, this is from 1969. It's stunning that back in 1969, this is what the brand looked like. Super clean, super iconic. And somehow it went to that in a matter of 25 years. So what happened? And you start to look at the history of the timeline of the identity, and you realize, wow, between 69 and 2007, what event happened? You think, well, how did it suddenly lose its way in 2003? And you realize this is the arrival of desktop publishing. This is the arrival of computer technology where anyone can have a go. Oh, look, you can put a drop shadow on there. You can add different textures. They put a drop shadow in the Coca-Cola script, which is just phenomenal if you think about it. So essentially what David Turner and this brilliant team, they just revitalized the brand. They stripped out all the decoration. They got rid of all the nonsense and the noise and went back to its fundamentals. And the result is, it's a landmark in graphic design. It's now called the Turner Duckworth. When a brand is the Turner Duckworth, this means we're cleaning off all the junk it's gathered and the weeds it's gathered over the years. And when this was launched, there were people inside the company were freaking out that they'd taken away too much. It was becoming too simplistic. Again, the word simple, tough to use with clients. But essentially what David Turner was doing is he was creating space. He was pushing all this stuff back. He was aware that, the noise in the retail environment, you need to create space to get your ideas out there. And in fact, Turner Duckworth, their whole philosophy launched this whole aesthetic around the brand expression. Here's what I did for the Coca-Cola 100-year anniversary of the Coca-Cola bottle, which was a campaign I worked on. But again, it's a simple, the recognizable, the straw in the bottle, but then I added a little flame, the birthday flame at the top. Again, subtle, but impactful once you make the connection. That was part of the global 100 years of the Coca-Cola bottle. We launched here on the bottom right, the mashup series. We invited 100 designers to create 100 different versions of the poster. We did exhibitions, this went global. And the brief was super simple. 100 years of the Contour bottle, black, red, white. That was it. It was a 3-line brief. And the results were pretty spectacular. Here's one. We started out the brief saying we'll take archival imagery and update it, reframe it. Kiss the past hello was what was our motto, and turn it into a contemporary expression. Here's one I did where I took the same graphic but just turned it on its side. And part of the original brief in 1915 for the bottle was, it should be recognizable in the dark, no matter what. You can still find it and recognize it. So this idea of the bottle disappears, just the bottle cap is present. Again, bottle cap obsession. Here's another one where I just took the bottle cap, that became the pixel essentially to draw the rest of the bottle. So it stacks up. The one on the right, I found, again, you look for that little moment of delight inside the script, the Coca-Cola script. It's just we took the hyphen, and if you multiply the hyphen, you end up with a straw, which is, drinking the Coca-Cola. This actually was a billboard ad shell out in Malaysia, I think. So it traveled pretty far, some of these concepts. Here's the combination we did with brand collaboration with Moleskine. First time they've ever reprinted their stripe. I said, okay, let's just take what's symbolic of Moleskine and, you know, combine it with what's symbolic of Coca-Cola, which is the contour bottle. And we ended up with this. This is pretty successful. Printed quite a few of these. I sent some over. Andy, I'm not sure if Andy received them yet, but I sent some over to you guys. Here's a collaboration I did with Pinterest and Google to celebrate the 100 years of the bottle. Again, you know, the iconic bottle with the pen, iconic bottle with the different colored straws for Google. Again, take the familiar, combine it together and find something more interesting. The contour bottle itself, I was leading the track for the visual identity system for this big global campaign. And, you know, we had the agency visit Ogilvy from London, and they were developing these scripts, you know, Martians land, and to see the bottle as a spaceship, like these really huge, big scripts, big scenarios. And I said, hang on, I felt there was something in the bottle itself. I said, if you're celebrating a glass bottle, you got to focus on the bottle. So I was trying to draw the bottle when I was brushing my teeth. I drew it on the condensation. It's a very difficult shape to draw, I find. So I just held my hands up and I thought, oh, hang on a second. If you put your two hands together and then imagine a bottle cap in between it, you'll get the shape of the bottle. So I developed the mashup poster around that iconic idea where the negative space takes up the bottle. I shared that original sketch with Ogilvy Paris, and they developed a stunning ad campaign out of it, which was kind of a thrill to see. This won a couple of gold lions at Cannes in that year. I think won Eurobest as well, Grand Prix. And they went to town. They actually activated in Berlin, developed the out of home. So it was very successful. I'm not sure a lot of markets picked up on it because it was a little too cerebral for a mass consumer audience. Didn't show the product, but the point was we're celebrating the bottle, not the product. So I'm going to hand it over to Ted just to run the commercial they made from that. So this notion of, you know, a small idea can actually travel very far.
I'll just switch to it now.
Great. All good?
We're back.
Oh, good. So yeah, the notion of a small idea can become a very big expression. And I think as graphic designers, we're very reductive. We think small because we're used to designing in small spaces with very little resources. I don't envy my advertising colleagues who have everything at their hands, all the technology, all the audio, animation, everything. It's a harder job for them. For us, I think it's easier, I think, because we think in terms of what's the essence of the bottle versus what are the big stories we can tell. So I've don't have a lot of time left. I'm probably going to run over a little bit, Andy, if that's okay. But clients and communicating with clients, this notion of communicating, not decoration, and in the context of clients. Here's Simon Sinek with his golden circle, which we use all the time. We quote from it all the time. People don't buy what you make. You know, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. I said the failure to communicate the why creates nothing but stress and doubt. So it's this notion of the why versus the what, right? I'll just tell you a story from my experience. I was at Coca-Cola. I was going to a meeting where a tier one agency, it might have been Wyden Kennedy, Ogilvy Mather, Turner Duckworth, Collins, were presenting their work. So it was a multifunctional team on the client side. And at the end of the meeting, the agency says, okay, we'll just get your feedback. Never ask clients for feedback in real time. It's the worst thing you can possibly do. Say, go away, think about it for 48 hours and then get back to us. But they did the firing squad. They said, tell us what you think. So people gave their thoughts, and it was like I don't think it went very well. But what was really interesting was the work was brilliant, of course, gorgeous work. As we were leaving the meeting, one of the marketing directors said to me, he said, "Hey, Tom, you're a designer. Come over to my desk. I want to show you my party invitation." She was having a baby, they call baby shower. So she put the invitation up on the screen. And I was like stunned. I think my jaw dropped. But in that 3-second pause, she kind of looked up at me and said, "Oh, we really love it. And we got this girl on the internet. She designed it for $50." And I thought, I was about to launch into, well, critique it and tell her how to fix it. I said, no. I said, if you love it, that's fine. I walked away and I thought, hang on a second. It was hit me forcibly. She said, she's looking at this invitation, which is dreadful. The same eye she's looking at the work from the tier 1 agency. I mean, and from my point of view, and you're, as designers, you look and go, wow, this is night and day. She didn't see the difference because she was looking at the artifact, right? And when you're just looking at the artifact, a matter of, personal taste and aesthetics come in. Whereas the strategy is where she lives. She's an MBA. She went to Wharton, London School of Economics, Harvard, whatever. She lives in terms of insights and strategy. So your design artifact, if you're arguing the artifact, you're dead in the water because her standards are not going to be yours. So you've got to connect the design back to the strategy. It's blue because of this, it's Helvetica because of that. I know this sounds very simplistic, but it's essential to make progress with clients like that. So if you look at the project flow from strategy to launch, if you're missing strategy and insights in terms of connecting the concept and design back to those, you're dead in the water. You'll spin. That's where you'll end up decorating. And I've got another story where I was consulting on a project at Coke, and the brand director called me and said, "Listen, can you call the agency? We're not happy. We seem to be in a rut." So he was kind of pissed off. He was having stress and doubt per Simon Sinek. So I called up the creative director, very well-known agency. I said, "Listen, hey, what's going on? Just got a call from the director, not happy. Let me know what's going on your side." So, "Hey, hang on a second, Tom." And she looked at her desktop and said, "Listen, we've delivered 54 rounds of work on this project." I said, "You're kidding, 54 rounds?" I thought, you're clearly losing the plot. You've lost the client at that. If you're not cracking it in 4 rounds or 3 rounds, there's something not right. So they clearly weren't connecting back to the strategy and insights. So the 3 things happened there. Number 1, the client is pissed off. And even though he's spending a fortune, he thinks he's spending a lot of money. He's not happy. Number 2, your account team is coming back saying, "You've done 54 rounds. We're losing money here. We're bleeding money. I'm going to have to charge the client more money." So the client's going to be even more pissed off. And number 3, most importantly, the design team is burning out. They're sick of this project. They can't stand this brand. They've done it 54 times. So you've got to be cracking it much sooner. Otherwise, they're going to, if you ignore the strategy and insights connection, they're going to go to testing. So you know what? The customers will design it for us. You're out of the picture. Highly recommend this from one of the masters of branding, Martin Lambinaire. If you find it, you'll see the Lambinaire connection on YouTube, Preparing for the Digital Age. This is the rebranding he did for BBC. I worked with Martin at BBC on the World redesign. I was internal, he was the external client. But have a look at this video and see how he prosecutes it. He's like a prosecutor in court. First of all, he audits, which is your best tool as a designer, audit everything. But then he runs through all the considerations: technical, strategy, tactical, financial. And his last argument is the aesthetic. It says, he calls it the Lovey argument. He says, even, our choice of typeface is based on Eric Gill's sculptures around the broadcasting house. So he left nothing to chance. I think it's a brilliant lesson for all of us that we need to make sure the client is on board. They were nodding all the way through that presentation on technical, strategic, tactical, and most importantly, financial. They were the reasons why this was the right solution. He's essentially selling 3 letters in 3 boxes. You can imagine the number of people just launching into that, trying to put their fingerprints on it. But he was a master. He was an absolute master. And if you think it was too rigorous or too controlled, he's still capable of some of the best creative and that's been produced in his career. I also love what he did with his logo, the minus and the plus. I'm just conscious of time. We took that for Studio Farrell. I leaned back into my Irish roots and did a combination of Studio and Farrell. But what was more interesting was the idea of the apostrophe. Apostrophe is a symbol of, you leave something out, you edit. Good design is about editing. It gives us our apostrophe eyes, whereas a tribute back to Alan Fletcher, the art of looking sideways. And we have fun with that mnemonic. We play with it at different holiday times. Here's Thanksgiving, here's pandemic. In fact, a lot of our projects, thanks to Martin Laminaire, we follow that same principle of build a strategy, build a connection to the design. A lot of our projects are first round, second round success, which makes it profitable for us. Some of them, Dallas Market Center, went to 5 rounds, but then they went back to the first round. So it works. Here's how we position our attributes. Strategic, we just talked about, connected back to the business. Crafted, got to make sure it's crafted, beautifully worked. And that's our art school training, formal design skills. Pragmatic in terms of communication. I see beautiful style guides that I said, we got to do nicer style guides. Ours are too much like a product category. But those style guides, you end up being very workmanlike. They're not aesthetic items. Here's an example of a rebrand we did a couple of years ago, a brand that was really trending downwards, not in good shape, losing a lot of share with essentially its audience was dying out. So we came together and gave them a sexier new image. We took the lightning bolt that was on the packaging and made that into an iconic symbol. The star is the symbol of Puerto Rico, where this brand is from. It's also a Latin American icon as well. But in terms of style guide, once you hand off the core empty elements, you've no control. you cannot control how it gets executed. So this is a Latin American energy brand. You can imagine this is going to go hog wild, but because the elements were fairly iconic, very flat, no decoration or skeuomorphism or anything, the executions are reasonably good. They were reasonably happy. They're not screwing it up too much. And this often happens where you got a transition phase in the middle, previous to the destination. You have to encompass that you can't leave the existing client base behind. You've got to keep that familiarity. In fact, the 2 other agencies were brought in and they fired them because they weren't getting the story that we were providing them. So here it is, future state, current state. These are different brands, different categories. They're working with silver, black, and white for the different parts of the portfolio. And these are the numbers. Back to the data again. This is we got 30, 45, and 60% growth for the companies. This is pre-COVID growth. So from the business point of view, the client, that's all they want. When they see these numbers, you're golden. You can walk on water, because they're delivering results. And that was primarily due to the VIS redesign. Okay, I'm going to go real fast. Insights in the outlook sideways. When I was growing up, there was an ad at 9 o'clock, the prime advertising time. The screen would just go blank, nothing, right? In television terms, you call it a black hole. No audio, no visual. It's a disaster in television for that to happen. I mean, something's broken down. But about 20 seconds in, and this is a prime time advertising space, a voiceover would come up and say, this 30 seconds of darkness is brought to you by Guinness. I thought, even as a kid, I was thinking, man, it's just the way they're playing with the medium, the way they're disrupting, they're doing something so unexpected, so minimal. Even though they had all the money in the world and all the capabilities, this is what they chose. And it left such an impression on me as a child. Beware of pickpockets. This is something my dad used to tell me the story about at horse race meetings, where people would show up with a lot of money to gamble. At the entrance, they would have this sign, which is very responsible. People made aware that there are pickpockets in the place. But as it turned out, the people who put the sign up were the pickpockets. They put the sign there themselves. And their fundamental insight was that they know human nature, that if you see a sign saying beware pickpockets, the first thing you do is you tap your wallet. You tap your back pocket, your chest pocket. In other words, you indicate where the wallet is, because you pat it and go, yes, I still have it. And of course, the pickpockets would just sit there and spot the juiciest pigeons and go in and relieve them of their money. But this to me is working on such a level, we can only aspire to something like this. I think it's brilliant, it's fantastic, and it's the ultimate in communication and effective communication, even though it's developed by thieves. So wrapping up, here's again, we're looking for that insight, whether it's the thieves looking for people looking at the pockets. This is something we see, every Christmas, these trees are adorned and worshipped and they're in the center of the family home. And then they're just thrown away at the end of it, these healthy trees. It's almost like a death squad came by in the middle of the night and just threw them out there. It's such a sad sight. And we thought, we found an organization called $1 One Tree Planted. We thought, okay, we'll turn our business card or our Christmas card to help, donations to this organization. 120 million trees are cut down every year just for Christmas trees. And it's the last 10 days. So we saw this something that we could, instead of sending out a usual Christmas card, we try and combine it with an insight. This idea of how can we make it effective and invoke some sort of action on the receiver's side. So this is the one we sent to Andy. Free dollar bill, free money. Ironically, the least expensive element in this is the dollar bill itself. So it was probably but this notion of a real dollar bill, this is the insight we're trying to work on. To say, well, if somebody gets a card with a real dollar bill, they're not going to throw it away. Every card is thrown away in January 1st, right? Our sort of secret ambition would be that in terms of our own promotion, that the card would be kept. Not going to throw away money. And if you're going to pry the dollar off it and spend it, well, good luck to you. But this notion of keeping it as a keepsake and it's almost like a calling card for us, for our business. But this, we got a lot of good reaction with this. D&AD gave us a nod. So we're very happy with the outcome. We love playing with Christmas trees. We use it, all our logos, client logos, to develop one of our Christmas trees one year. Love this idea of playing with the, taking the alphabet and turning it backwards. And we end up with our initials, SOF, in a nice little Christmas tree typographic arrangement. We all celebrate New Year's. Here's our latest one, 2023. This is one from 2017 on the left. I just finished a job on Chevy cars, and I made that connection. The rear view mirror, it's a total cliche, but it works in terms of, we're looking backwards. We've moved on to 2018. The one on the right is interesting in terms of, we're trying to use that sort of found object. We got an applause from the head of the graphic design school here in the States. We thought, that's great. We got a nice shout out or call out from that head of design. Then the next day, he did the same thing for the one on the left, which is David Carson's holiday card, green card. I thought, how can you like the same two cards? Maybe just like the idea of New Year. But for me, we're diametrically opposed. I can't do what David does. It's too much decoration. It's too much sort of just stuff, right? I have to find the magic in the numerals. I have to find, that we made it into our design god. We hope it speaks to you kindly during the year, winks at you. But this notion of, creating space and then delivering an interesting idea inside that space versus here's a bunch of stuff, figure it out. I think that's where we differ. I think this is back to the DNA coming from design DNA coming from the modernist, mid-century modernist movement for design, Alan Fletcher, Pentagram. We live in that camp. Maybe it's a generational thing, but that's where we live. So communication, not decoration, just wrapping it up. I still think, I'll go back to those principles at the front. Branding in a noisy environment, communicating in a noisy environment, familiarity, find what's familiar, find the cliche, clarify it, make it clear to repeat it. Consistency is totally underrated in global marketing. The idea of just executing consistently and predictability is enormously underrated. When people say, well, that's a predictable idea, actually, that's a good thing, because then consumers, this guy will get it. He'll connect with it. It's like the little squirrels looking at Jamie's logo. I think those principles are absolutely the thread of creating communication, not decoration. So that's it, guys. I think I've run over by 10 minutes, but hopefully it hasn't upset your schedule too much. I'm sure at the end of the day, you're beat. You've had enough. So I'm going to hand it back to Andy and Ted.
Yeah.